For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael. Happy Easter.
Good morning. Happy Easter to you. And as you quite rightly say, it's Easter, and that means Easter Monday, and that means that the European markets, because of a holiday, are quiet. But Asia's still up and about, and the biggest movement there is basically Hong Kong, up about 1%. China is registering a population. I wouldn't say it's a crisis, but it's a sort of shortage. The population has descended from 1.412 billion to 1.413 from 1.413 billion. So basically, there was the one-child policy until about 2016, and then there was the reducing the size of the family. That stopped in 2021. The danger of this, of course, is too many old people, not to put it too far, not to put too much of a far point on it, and that means that the population, the working population, is relatively small. And add to that, something that we're going to hear about, I think, in the next few weeks, is that the financial sector in China is bracing itself from examinations by something called the Commodities Discipline Inspection, and this is something which is going to be looking at financial services and whether bankers are actually paid too much. But we'll get more on that, I think, as the days go on. But that's what they're bracing themselves for as we start the second quarter. Tesla is opening a plant. It's called a mega factory in China. What this is about is making mega batteries, and these are huge batteries which allow generating companies to swap supply, but the people who are being supplied shouldn't notice because these batteries tend to fill the gap in between the two. There is already a plant in California. Now they're opening one in China. ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok, and we know all about that, its growth, nevertheless, up 79%, which takes it above Alibaba. And they've been, Alibaba, of course, has been hit by the big tech crackdown. And TikTok, although it's now having to have their own security concerns raised about it, its parents at least, is doing extremely well. As far as the US is concerned, stock futures not up too much. Now, let me remind you about Friday. We got even though it's Good Friday, the beginning of the Easter holiday, we did get the jobs figures, 236,000 as opposed to 238 expected. They were quite sort of on tune, those results, but there's still this kind of thought that maybe the Fed will still keep tightening. There is no reason not to, because the labour market's looking fairly well supported. And this week we get CPI and PPI from the United States, and also the banking sector begins. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and also, perhaps slightly more importantly, we'll also get a view of how the regional banks are doing. If you remember, those regional bank failures and difficulties dominated the first quarter of the year. It's also likely that the U.S. Consumer Secretary, she's called Gina Raimondo, may go to China, not to ask for any particular diplomatic support, but to check on the trade promises that China actually made. It, for example, promised to buy Boeing aeroplanes, and the deals are worth tens of billions of dollars. That hasn't happened. So there is some sort of promise there which has not been upheld. It may be that she will be going there. Officials are already meeting to try to pave the way for that. The IMF begins its spring meeting in Washington, and the World Bank does as well. And there's a slightly optimistic note. This is from Brookings/FT survey this morning. Quite a major survey saying that China, US, the European Union, India, and the UK will lead the global recovery in the next 12 months. Now, you take your bets about this, because I happen to still think that it's still very risky out there. But anyway, this is what this survey is actually saying. So the IMF is meeting, it begins its meeting tomorrow, and these are expected to be quite sort of optimistic data for them. As far as the UK is concerned, the junior doctors' strike begins now. They want 35%. They won't get 35%. They say it's the biggest disruption that the NHS has faced within its history. The NHS are saying that they can cope, but in just to give you an example, in the 3-day strike in March, 175,000 appointments had to be cancelled. So I think they're going to find life very tough. And just as the doctor mentioned right at the beginning of this, it is the Easter season, and apparently the shoppers were out in the UK. Good Friday was excellent, 18% up on last year, but not in high streets, only in shopping centres. That's where people are tending to drive right now. That's the global view this morning. Happy Easter to you.
Well, unfortunately, Micah, the audio has not been so friendly, but, important points you raised there. Although I would have loved to take on the issue about population in China and the specific fact that the women in China are saying they would rather focus on their career, rather than have babies. But anyway, maybe tomorrow the audio will be better. Thank you very much. We'll take a short break now. When we return, the Morning Show will continue. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Now for business updates across the African continent. Rutus Utiri is here. Good morning, Rutus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Happy.
Good morning, Rutus.
Okay, red. This is for Easter, right?
Yes. What is this? Happy Easter Monday. Did they say that?
Yes.
It's still
They do, eh? Okay, well, so happy Easter Monday to everyone else. But look, it's a somber note today. I mean, we're looking at the Benue State. Again, if you look at the headlines today with respect to the bout of insecurity, you already were discussing Bishop Kuka and how he was speaking about insecurity, and even Ayo, you mentioned the need for actions over speaking. We wanted to look at Benue State since you had the governor just a couple last week. I think it was Thursday or Friday, right? We also talked about the new incoming governor, how he was saying the state of Benue is in ICU. So there was a clip. Looking at the outro from my show, I think it was on Thursday or Friday, looking at their mangoes, for instance, their agriculture there.
That Benue is a home for everyone. Remember, before I'm stepping in there as a governor, our history reveals that we had all cultures in Benue, and so it is, all cultures in Nigeria, in Benue. So I believe that my time would not be different. If there were some errors, I'm coming to correct them.
This mango came in from Benue State. Look at the size of this thing. Massive. Benue State, agriculture. Good stuff. That's going to do it for the Global Business Report. Do stay tuned to Arise News. From all of us, thank you so much. Look, Benue State is the food basket of Nigeria, right? You could set up cargo airports, rail, and export. That mango is from one of our producers, Lillian. She's from Benue State, brought it in. I mean, I thought they had injected it with something to enhance it, but it just shows you the agricultural, riches that the nation has. But it is under siege. You had the governor, Otum, on Thursday, Friday. You asked him about the low IGR. Doctor, you asked him about a number of things. Here's what he said about what they've been doing about internally generated revenue.
Thank you very much, my sister. I'll tell you the truth. My administration have tried to ensure that we improve on our IGR, because when we discovered that not much was coming to take care of our financial needs in Benue State, we decided to look for creative ways and innovative ways that we improve on our IGR. That we did. We brought experts, we brought technocrats, we brought people that we felt will be able to add value and make things work for us in Benue State to improve on the IGR, to augment whatever comes from the Federation account. Unfortunately, you will realize and you will see that since we came in, and even before then, the challenge was the issue of security. As I talk to you 18 local governments out of the 23 local governments we have in Benue State today are under siege by these terrorist Fulani herdsmen.
Now, in October of last year, Benue State government made a big show of its volunteer community security outfit. We covered it live. Here is an excerpt from that.
They are indeed trained to quell civil unrest and any form of disorderliness, riots and what have you. And so you may stage forward a demonstration to that effect. That is the demonstration. Action-packed. That is the demonstration, full of action. Gallant officers and men of the Benue State Community Volunteer Guards. Very historic, very remarkable, very significant. They are indeed ready for action.
They're ready for action, yet people are still dying. And the governor in his tenure in office, 8 years? He says he's done a number of things to improve IGR, but he's putting it all on security. If he's putting it all on security, then whose job is it then to secure the people of Benue? Speaking of economy, look, okay, there is food supply shocks. Food inflation is very high. I referred to this list again and again and again, where the CBN governor talked about why food inflation is high. And he mentioned the fact that transportation is high. He mentioned security issues in food producing areas, like the breadbasket being Benue, and then legacy infrastructure challenges. Quickly running through Benue State. Benue State, according to budget, as far as fiscal structure or fiscal ranking, look at that, is 36, dead last. One of the reasons why is because of Benue State's internally generated revenue. There are businesses in this country that make more. Okay, sorry, debt. Look at debt at the bottom. Benue State, 10% jump in debt increase, total debt, 128 billion to 141 billion. That's debt. We now go to revenues, the other economic metrics. There are IGR 12 billion. I mean, there are companies that make more money in after profit tax than Benue State as a whole. Look at their FAC, 61 billion, foreign debt at 2 million. Their IGR to FAC, Benue State is one of the most indebted nations when it comes to a Federal Accounts Allocation Committee from the center. 83% compared to just 16% internally generated revenue. So when the governor told you on Friday that, oh, we've been putting things in place to raise RGR, what he didn't even go into specifics. What was he talking about? What was done? Because your revenue is incredibly low. GDP 4.2 trillion, one of the lowest in the country. Look at this very interesting dynamic. Unemployment is only 11.9% as of 20, but look at underemployment, 43.52. So a lot of people are going into farming and doing things just to stay alive. This is reflected in the underemployment figures. Headline inflation 20%, food inflation, despite being the breadbasket, 23.3%. So a lot of challenges that Benue State is facing. And I think that the states across the board need to have an audit. Ease of doing business, they fell from 16th place in 2021 or 2022 16th place in 2022 to 23rd in 2023, according to PEBEC. Capital importation, Benue brought in $0. Nothing came in throughout 2022. Nothing. Look at how much they spend per capita for health. 1,552 naira. Education spend is just 3,000 naira per person. So it is, where do you go and where do you turn to if the governor is giving excuses and telling you, well, I put all these things in place to improve internally generated revenue, but insecurity, I can't do anything. So who do we turn to? Whose fault is it? So anyway, that's on Benue State. Easter Sunday, I'm sorry to have to call out a bank here, but some things have to be done. GTCO's network completely collapsed on Sunday. You couldn't log in to access the app. The branches weren't paying out any cash. When you tried to use a point of POS, they weren't working for hours. I mean, yes, in fact, even this morning, there's still people that are saying that, there have been some issues. It's a number of reasons. One, they're saying that their software engineers, a lot of them have left the country, a part of the jackpot wave, they've been hit by that. But the cash scarcity, I mean, if they were hanging on by their fingernails as far as being able to maintain their network, the absolute impact of cash scarcity on their network really came to the fore during that period. And and there were no emails, no messages, no notifications, nothing. It was really, really tough. So some of the networks, I'm sorry, yeah, it's not a very happy Easter Monday today, but that's what's going on, Doctor and Ayo.
It's a realistic Easter, and we have to tell the truth. Yeah. It's not just GT Bank that had issues yesterday. They started out, then Access later in the evening joined them. I think there's almost like an internal memo they send amongst themselves that once one app collapses, the others follow suit. But that's on a lighter note. Realistically, though, you said something very important. Yes, they might have issues with the hands that they have on ground because of the jackpot syndrome. Yeah. And I'm glad because we spoke about doctors last week, and I mentioned that it's not just in the medical sector that we should raise an alarm. In other sectors, and I believe that this is, I don't know how we're going to cope with this in the next few months and in next year if we don't do something drastic to curb this mass migration of our best hands to other parts of the world. Now, even if they had challenges with that, there's something about communication that for some reason, a number of organizations in Nigeria and government officials or government agencies don't have a grasp on. It's almost as if they take consumers or their clients for granted. Yeah. Why are you sending us emails of Happy Easter? I'm sure you got your own email posting up, and you cannot tell the people why on a day like Easter, when many families would go out to have a good time, maybe to go to the restaurant, go out to eat, or go for a picnic or something, and they would need to transact. You just silence, and it's not working. I was saying yesterday I put on Twitter that these days, in the past, you had to have multiple SIMs to avoid being embarrassed and to not lose businesses. Yeah. Now you have to have multiple bank accounts, not as a nice to have, as a must have. Because I had one bank account and I just had one card to just help me to manage my finances a bit better. And if I trust one, I don't believe in having too many. Right. But this, after the last few weeks, or the last few months, I'm like, you have to be wise, you have to wisen up. Let me go back to the MPC meeting where the governor of the central bank had assured Nigerians, he apologized, if you recall, for the bad service we've experienced in terms of transfers and services like that, and that things would improve. Unfortunately, a few weeks down the line, we're still seeing these things happen. Lack of access to cash, lack of access to even doing business digitally. The big question is, what is the impact of this disservice to businesses, to small businesses, to the loss on businesses? Because someone responded to my tweet saying that they'd gone to the supermarket and had to return everything they picked up because their bank card wasn't working. Yeah. There are many times that small businesses especially have suffered, quite deeply with regards to the failure of these banks. Yeah. Like you said, they might have legit reasons, or perhaps infrastructure cannot accommodate the influx or the deluge of clients coming to them because of the scarcity of cash. Yeah. But they've had a long time to deal with this. It is frustrating for their business, for their clients. It's not just GTB, so it's not like an attack, but other banks in Nigeria as well. And then just going back, the first point around Benue State. Rotis, can you do this for every state in Nigeria? Can we audit our states and hold them accountable? We will do it. I think that's just the one thing I would say because...
Okay, let me comment on Benue State. We have had Governor Autumn on this program again and again. And one of his major concerns has been security in Benue. And he blames Fulani people. Yeah. He mentions specifically. Even when we try to restrain him and say, no, don't do ethnic profiling, ethnic labeling, he will insist that, no, it's Fulani people disturbing his people in Benue. Now, this last weekend, in the last 48, 72 hours, between 87 and over 100 persons were killed across the state. In Apa, in Oturkpo, in Ngbam, in Umogidi, parts of the state. That, of course, is tragic. We commiserate with all the families that lost their lives. Indeed. The governor himself has issued a statement to say that, look, we are not going to retaliate, but that President Buhari, who also issued a statement, should go beyond commiserating with people and do something to restore law and order in Benue State. So security remains a big challenge in Benue State as it is in Kaduna State and in other parts of the country. Now, you were raising the question, you said, oh, this governor says, oh, any money we get, we'll put it to protect security. But the point to note here is that these governors are also handicapped. Section 215 of the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria puts the control of the police under the President of Nigeria. Section 215 sub 4 says, for example, that, okay, state governors can call out the police, but in reality, they really don't have such powers. So you find that these state governors who are called chief security officers, they are really handicapped. So despite the vigilante that they form, despite the deployment of IGR resources to security, there's also a limit to which you can blame them. So I'm not Governor Tom's spokesperson. Of course. But this is the theoretical point as we know it. Now, Hyacinth Alia, Father Hyacinth Alia of the APC, has now won election. He's succeeding Governor Tom. So he has his work cut out for him. And security will be one of the things that he will need to deal with. In fact, I've seen articles, people saying they are expecting from Father Alia Papa Magic to deal with security in Benue State. But it's not only security that we will have to deal with. He will also have to deal with backlog of pensions, of salaries, and many other economic challenges. As you have pointed out, in showing that Benue State is also one of those heavily indebted states. So you also have to address that. I asked Governor Tom the other day, I said, our market? He said, my market is very bad at this time. Okay, maybe he will find something else to do because being a governor, politics is not a profession. It's only in Nigeria that people take politics as a lifetime profession. As for GT Bank not making money available, I think many of the banks can be called out. It's not just GT Bank. Okay? There are many other banks that just shut down, that took advantage of the central bank's redesign of currencies. And they dropped the ball with regard to corporate governance, with regard to customer service. Okay? So if we make a list, we will be able to identify the ones that did well, the saints, and the villains. And I can take on that assignment and help you prepare a list. But I know Emmanuel Efeni's bank will be innocent. He was the only one around here who always got new notes while other banks failed. So the bank that Emmanuel Efeni uses, for example, we'll praise them. But the ones that didn't do well, it's not just GT Bank. Of course. There are many others. Of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.